Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, hey, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic is threat intelligence and dark web monitoring, uncovering secrets to better security. I want to start by saying a big thank you to all of you for joining us today. We're seeing you from warm places and cold places alike, from Michigan and Missouri, Kentucky, Utah, Massachusetts, San Francisco, Texas, Florida. We've got you from all over the place. St. Louis, California, North Carolina. I'm going to be down there in a couple of weeks on a bike ride. Missouri, and from all over the place. It is great to see all of you here today. Now, on the EcoCast, we have got some serious heavy hitters in this space, and that includes Rapid7, eCentire, Rubrik, and PlexTrack. That is going to add up to so much goodness today, I promise you. In addition to the superb education you're going to get, which you always get on these events, we have got some fantastic prizes for you today. We're going to be giving away three $300 Amazon gift cards. Now, that would be okay, wouldn't it? Yeah, I thought so. Now, as Jess said there at the beginning, you do have to be in live attendance to qualify. So, with that, it is time to get this show on the road, folks. We have got a special keynote for you today. The entire Mod Squad, you can see them right there, is in the house. Now, Jess is going to be taking us through a game show like pop quiz on reasons to use threat intelligence and monitor the dark web. I am super excited to get started. The other mods, Jess, Scott, and Mackenzie, are ready to go. So let's get to it.
Hey folks, well, hello and welcome to 3 out of 4 Cats, the game show where we find out who is top dog here in the Mod Squad. And on today's show, we will be discussing the top 4 reasons to embrace threat intelligence and dark web monitoring. Now, I'm your host, Jess Steinbach, and to help us through this conversation, we have 3 of our top expert, fantastical moderators here from Actual Tech Media: world traveler and beach enthusiast, Mackenzie Pudici; ocean navigating kayak aficionado, Scott Becker; and cycling expert and occasional dog escape artist, Keith Ward. Welcome to our 3 incredible experts, and thanks for joining us here today on 3 out of 4 Cats.
Meow.
Glad to be here. Just can't wait to get started.
I am also
Fantastic.
very excited.
Very excited. I love this. All right. Well, let's jump into our game. And as a reminder, we will be going through each of these questions. You will each get a chance to answer. We'll choose the best answer, and then we'll crown our top dog on 3 out of 4 Cats. All right. Are you ready, contestants?
I'm ready.
I was born ready.
Let's start out with proactive threat identification. Scott, start us out.
All right, I'm just marking down my answer.
Excellent.
I love this this first option. I think it's the clear response. Aggregate, analyze data from various sources, and monitor where the bad guys hang out. So A is my response to this one.
Fantastic answer. Very much appreciate that. Dynamic landscapes, very important. Mackenzie, what do you think?
There's a few here that seem like obvious no's, so I do think the dynamism, since I'm on my A game here, is what I'm looking at. You know, you got to monitor what's happening preemptively, get all that data, and analyze it. So I'm also going with A.
Option A. Okay, we've got a lot of interest in this proactive approach. Keith Ward, what do you think?
Okay, well, I took a different route here, you see. I wrote C for number one, open all your firewall ports because we're in a new era here. Firewalls don't really matter anymore, as we all know. So why not just open them up and make less work for yourself so you don't have to monitor them anymore, C all the way.
Now that's an interesting approach there, Keith. If you
It-
open all the floodgates, you know you'll get flooded, so you don't have to watch for any floods. Interesting.
but
All
nobody
right.
uses
Well,
firewalls, right? Am I right here?
while I appreciate your creativity, Keith, I'm not sure our audience agrees. Let's do a quick poll and decide on the best answer. The correct answer is going to be A. Scott and Mackenzie, you've got that one. Anything else that we want to add to this thought here for our audience out there?
Just that proactive approach is so important now. For a long time, security was reactive, like in option B there. But now there are so many options out there to get out in front of threats, and it's really important to take advantage of that.
Agreed. I like that. Get out in front of it, but don't open the floodgates, is what we're taking away. Do not listen to Keith Ward on point number one. All right, let's move things along. Let's talk about holistic risk assessment. So, the options that we have here assume that what you did when all data was on prem will work the same now. That's option A. Option B, check as few sources as possible because, hey, you're really busy. Or option C, integrate information from multiple sources, including the dark web, for a comprehensive view of risk. Some great options here. I'm curious what you all think. Scott, I'm going to start out with you again. Holistic risk assessment. What do you think?
So I'm going to go with option C, integrate information from multiple sources, including the dark web, for a comprehensive view of risks. It seems so important to you know in the previous one we're proactively collecting information, but then once you're collecting it, you've really got to integrate it, and you've got to get it from other sources, so like open source reporting, and everywhere you can find it, to give yourself the best chance of protecting your enterprise. So C.
I I like it. Option C, that's a great flow. Not only are we being proactive, but we're being proactive in our understanding of the threat landscapes. Mackenzie, what do you think about holistic risk assessment? Which answer is speaking to you, my friend?
Well, I couldn't go with A because it's never safe to assume anything. So that, deductive thinking was just out
Hmm.
right away. B, I mean, checking few sources, I'm skeptical about that. So I also went with C. Can you see that? Um, Scott said it all pretty much. I'm not copying him per se, but he did a pretty good lay of the land there.
Riding on Scott's coattails, I like it. I see your C, Mackenzie, and I'm going to hand things over to Keith Ward. Keith, what do you got?
Now, now, see, Mackenzie was on the right track there for a minute when
Hmm.
when he was talking about answer B, check as few sources as possible because you're really busy. See, B is the right answer there. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff you have to get done every day. Who has time to check this and that? When you got to fight fires all the time. I mean, come on, you got to streamline operations. And so that means checking as few sources as possible, doesn't it? Doesn't it?
I guess if you can't see that there's a problem, there isn't one.
Now,
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you,
this is
Mackenzie. You get it. You get it.
this is some interesting advice that we're offering to our audience here today. And so the Keith Ward school of thought to date is open all floodgates and invite threats in so that you don't have to watch for threats. And also embrace the fact that you are too busy to do any research or general awareness. Keith, am I correct in my summary so far?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know
Interesting.
what Scott and Mackenzie are thinking about, but obviously they have nothing but spare time to do all of this stuff all day.
Clearly too much time for
Yeah.
Scott and Mackenzie. Well, let's see what our audience thought. We are going to see if 3 out of 4 cats agree. And option or question two here is Answer C, integrate the information from multiple sources. Answer C. So more points for Scott and Mackenzie on this one. Keith falling behind.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Whatever you say. I may have some things to say to the judges later, but yeah, yeah. Keep going. Keep going.
Keith dramatically
Keep going.
disagreeing
Yeah.
with this assessment, but you know what? There's still two more questions to go, Keith. Let's see how we go here. Reason number 3, early warning system. A, use analytics to identify patterns and anomalies. Search the dark web for mentions of your company. B, don't even try. It's impossible to get advance warning. Give up, walk away. Or C, make sure you get a launch detection from NORAD. Now, I'm afraid to start with Keith on this one. So, Scott, I'm going to continue on with you. What do you think?
Well, I think we could rule out, getting a launch detection from NORAD. Most security issues don't start with a nuclear strike, and even so, there's not much we can do about those. I don't think from a security standpoint. So, I'm going to go with A here. Use analytics to identify patterns and anomalies. Search the dark web for mentions of your company. I mean, this is great advice. Analytics. There's been a huge, a lot of hype around AI and justified. So I don't know if hype is the word for it, but even before that, analytics. We're using machine learning and things like that to identify security problems. And it's just, a lot of those tools are pretty mature, but still improving. So that seems like a solid option to me.
I like it. A solid choice from Scott Becker. Mackenzie, do you feel equally solid?
I feel equally solid in A. And I want to just say to Keith, it's not that I have infinite free time, it's that I use things like AI and programs to save me time so I don't have to do the work.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
Mackenzie always has an answer for everything.
Disagreement from our expert cats here. Keith, what do you think?
Okay, well this was the easiest one so far. It's obviously C. Make sure you get a launch detection from NORAD. Do you see the topic there at the top? Early warning system. What does that tell you? And besides, that comes directly from War Games, one of the great movies, one of the classic movies from the early 80s, Matthew Broderick. We didn't get a launch detection from NORAD. I mean, how can you not pick the one that is a direct reference to war games? It's really simple.
Scott
Scott's adjusting his answer, by the way.
Scott adjusting his answer to a solid wow. Well, let's see what our judges and the audience here thought. For reason number 3, answer A. Use analytics to identify patterns and anomalies. Search the dark web for mentions of your company. So, interestingly enough, Keith, they did not agree with your war games theory. Although, again, a solid wow from Scott Becker. So maybe take that.
It, I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss for words at
Clearly a
this
loss
point.
coming, Keith.
So
Yes, you are. You are indeed at a loss, Keith.
I think maybe we should
Or
just move on to number 4, Jess. What do you
reason
think?
4. Let's bring it on
Okay.
home here. Strategic decision making. So answer A, rely solely on a third party security partner to keep you safe. Solely on that third party. Answer B, know your enemy, understand their tactics and mindset to develop proper defenses against attacks. And answer C, and I'm almost afraid to say this one out loud, watch a TikTok of security videos featuring the one and only Taylor Swift. Scott Becker, one last time, what do you think the answer is?
Yeah. So, option A is actually, it's interesting for, maybe a smaller company that doesn't have much of a security team. If you can find yourself a trusted, MSSP or somebody like that, in a lot of ways, turning security over to an expert isn't a bad idea. But, outside of a pretty small organization, I think the answer is pretty clearly B. Know your enemy, understand their tactics and mindset to develop proper defenses against attack. So I'm going to go with B.
A solid B with a parentheses A and an asterisk on it. I appreciate that. Mackenzie, what do you think?
I'm gonna have to say, Scott put that really well. It is interesting when smaller organizations don't have, the funds or the personnel to put together a huge security system, so to speak. But I do think B, in an ideal world, is what we'd go with.
Know your enemy. Keith, I'm a little afraid to ask this, but I'm going to ask for your answer, my friend. What do you think?
Well, so originally, I have to say here, I had B also because, I figured that's what Scott and Mackenzie would pick, right? Okay. So I figured, how often do I want to be on the outside of this? But I just had to go with my gut. So I crossed out B and I went with C. Again, watch a lot of TikTok security videos featuring Taylor Swift. You know why? Because Taylor would never steer us wrong. Okay. She's the best. And, and I saw her at the Super Bowl and everything. And I mean, it just seemed like the answer couldn't be more clear.
Famous cybersecurity expert Taylor Swift weighing in here. Thank you so much, Keith, for those very interesting thoughts. Let's check with our judges. The judges have gone with B. Know your enemy, Keith. So unfortunately, we are 0 for 4 with you, Keith. You are not our top dog today on 3 out of 4 cats. But Keith, I have a very important question that I've been wanting to ask you since your first answer. Didn't you used to work in this? Cybersecurity was what you did.
Well, I worked in IT, yes, for a little bit of time. Eventually, my company decided to go in a different direction, after the fifth or so, security breach. I mean, you just can't,
Sure.
please some people. So I don't know what the deal was with that, but then I went right into journalism from there. And I've been happy ever since. And by the way, you can believe everything that's on TikTok. That's another reason to choose answer C. So
Well,
there you
clear
go.
takeaways from our conversation today. Believe everything that you hear from Keith Ward and believe everything that you hear on TikTok. I'd like to thank all of our cats for joining us on 3 out of 4 cats, and we'll see you again next time.
Meow.
Bye. Okay, well, I just have to say something right here to everyone. I mean, that game was totally rigged, wasn't it? I mean, I should have cleaned up. I don't know what Mackenzie and Scott were doing, but they were obviously off their games today. So now with that, we're going to move on to something else here really quickly, and that's our poll question of the day. Let us know where you are on your buying journey in 2024, everyone. Are you looking to add new or update existing stuff in the next half year, couple of years, or you just don't know at this point? Keep voting in those polls. And yeah, let me know how you think that little game show went. I think I definitely was on the right track with those. And some people may differ in that opinion, but what do they know? So they didn't work in IT. So there. All right. Keep voting here for another minute, and we are going to move along. This is your last chance to do that. And now we are going to get to our first presentation of the day. What do you say? This session comes from Rapid 7, and presenting for Rapid 7 is Megan Buchanan, Director of Product Marketing Detection and Response. That is one long title. Megan, it is great to have you here today. So I am going to turn this bad boy over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining our webcast today. We appreciate your time. The topic of today, we'll be chatting through how to effectively monitor your external attack surface to be able to look for targeted threats against your organization. The goal being to be able to anticipate and identify these attacks as early as possible and keep your organization safer at the end of the day. So we're excited to talk through this. Please feel free to ask any questions in the chat along the way. I'll try to keep an eye out as we go through, but otherwise I'll absolutely take a few minutes at the end to catch any questions that I've missed. Let's jump into it. So This is a hot topic as we continue to see cybercrime, unfortunately, continues to be a booming industry right now. It's actually the third largest economy in the world behind the US and China, with much of the most nefarious behavior happening out on the dark web. This has been further fueled by the rise of digital currencies, which make it easier to transact and exploit victims without being able to trace, who is actually benefiting from these transactions. And this is part of the reason why we're seeing record amounts of ransomware payments, and again, just an absolute boom in cybercrime overall. And so while the deep and dark web and the external attack surface is home to a lot of this activity, it's also a really important thing for security teams to be thinking about monitoring and how they can have eyes there. Many of us are very focused on our internal perimeter, which is obviously super critical, but monitoring your external attack surface effectively can be the difference between a minor event and a major breach. And yet, it's out of reach for a lot of teams today, which we're going to talk about more. So I see that someone has put a question in the chat already. What is the difference between the deep and the dark web? Which, thank you for submitting that. It's a great segue into talking more about, what do I mean by external attack surface? So thank you for that question. So, clear, deep, and dark web, these are terms you're going to hear a lot when we start talking about the external attack surface. The clear web is probably the part that most of us are most familiar with today. So this is the portion of the internet that is indexed by search engines. It's accessible to the general public. It includes, websites that all of us are looking at every day, the things that we visit, news sites, all of our socials, shopping websites, all of those different things that we're online looking at all the time. It's easily searchable and accessible through all of our standard, Google Chrome, whatever web browser you're using, you could get there. But looking at the dark web and the deep web, and sometimes these terms are used synonymously, but they're actually quite different. So the deep web is everything on the World Wide Web that isn't automatically indexed by web crawlers from Google or other indexing, Bing, whomever you're using. And there are a lot of different reasons why certain websites might not be accessible. Could be behind paywalls, although many of those do allow indexing, but it could be a paywall situation. It could be a private company that, intentionally we don't want to have that information public. Think about things like GitHub and that sort of stuff. Your bank account, medical records, things like that. So some website owners could also put digital notifications on their site to stop search engines and crawlers from indexing their content. So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons why, but it's basically the information that's unindexed by search engines, but it's still available via your standard web browser that we're all using today. But the dark web is part of the internet that is not accessible by the browsers that all of us are using every day. So it's made up of hidden sites that are only accessible from the Tor browser or specialized search engines. And again, it's really ground zero for a vast majority of cybercrime that goes down today. Not to say that there isn't cybercrime on the clear and deep web, which of course there is, but really the dark web is home to a lot of this nefarious behavior. And most of us have probably never visited the dark web. Even cybersecurity professionals, typically less than 1 in 7 have ever visited the dark web. So it's part of the wider attack surface that is often going unmonitored and unseen by security teams. And yet it's often where some of the earliest phases of attacks begin. And so, thinking about the attack chain, the earliest phases of the kill chain, MITRE's referred to these as the pre-attack chain. That's where a lot of these different activities are going down. So the pre-attack chain, we're looking at the tactics, techniques, and procedures that adversaries are using to be able to, identify a target, obtain information, and really initiate that attack campaign against an organization. So thinking about this pre-attack framework is really beneficial to organizations, and it can give you a broader understanding of those attack vectors and how cyber criminals act. So if you look at, the reconnaissance and resource development phases of the MITRE attack chain. These are where tactics like phishing for information, gathering identity information, credential harvesting, acquiring domains, all of these different steps that are those earliest signals that an attacker might be choreographing a targeted attack against your business. That's where these things are going to live. And again, we talk about phishing, we talk about credential leakage. These are things that we're all familiar with, but we're not necessarily always thinking about those very first steps. What's the precursor to how someone got into your environment? What are those very initial phases? We talk about phishing a lot, but think about typo squatting as an example. So you have attackers that are registering a domain. And it looks, similar to your organization. We can use Rapid7 as an example. So, just 1 or 2 characters off, rapid77.com, or, replace the D with an S or something like that. Anything like that, all of a sudden, with the right design, it can become very easy, to catch a user, an employee, a customer, even someone who's well-trained. Can become very easy to trick them and capture their credentials with a type of squatting domain. And unfortunately, again, it's incredibly effective. And there are hundreds of thousands of these sites out there today. And it can be really hard for companies to monitor for that sort of thing. The credential side, again, there are dozens of different examples, but think about credential botnets as another one. So these are often for sale on the dark web, and these can be used for credential stuffing attacks. So you've got a huge collection of stolen usernames and passwords from previous breaches or attacks that then, these botnets are automatically testing against all different websites to see where they work. And they're able to automate this at a huge scale. So as we all know, unfortunately, inevitably, someone has reused their credentials somewhere, and they're able to find a place where these creds work on another website, and they're going to be able to zero in and sell that information. So just a couple of examples, but it gives a flavor for some of these sort of activities that, again, are happening outside your perimeter. It could be representative of those earliest phases of attack, but they're also really challenging to effectively and proactively monitor for consistently. But fortunately, there is technology and services that can help. And digital risk protection is one of those technologies. And so this is a way to be able to, again, look for that kind of nefarious behavior, the different signals that someone is kind of initiating a targeted attack, or they're positioning themselves to collect information or put themselves in a place where they are going to be positioned to attack your company. And so to be able to look across the open or clear, deep and dark web sources, to be able to identify, where are there threats against your digital assets, your credentials, your domains, your brand, and being able to get information about these threat actors and the TTPs that they're using for these activities. So that's digital risk protection. It's a really valuable tool in the tool belt. And these are just, again, kind of a sample to give a flavor of the sort of use cases that DRP can help monitor for. So again, looking for, hey, what credentials are out there? Are my employees potentially exposed? And it might not have been a breach against your company. It could have been somewhere else. But again, we know that people reuse passwords. They use their credentials in many places. And, those can be harvested in different ways. And so a great DRP service can be able to look at different databases. It can look at the places where, botnets are for sale and that sort of thing. A great DRP service. And again, there's different degrees here, but we're able to infiltrate the dark web and kind of position ourselves as an attacker to identify this information and materials that are for sale. Similarly with data leakage, so credit cards for sale, IP for sale, patents, different things, patent pending information or intellectual property that is unique to your organization, confidential documents, legal documents, that sort of thing. We're able to go into file sharing sites, information stealer forums, and identify where that information might be exposed. phishing protection. Again, we think about, phishing emails, but what are some of the precursors to that, or what are the different ways that phishing can present itself? The websites, the domains that can be compromised. Again, typo squatting was an example that I shared. So being able to monitor zone files, registrars, places where people are buying these domains, setting them up, and understanding that they're actually, taking it the next step to, set up email against those domains and that sort of thing. Those are the sort of indicators that would show that they're setting up a phishing campaign. And again, other info, stealer data for sale, targeted lists, things that would signal a very targeted attack against your organization, or other attacks that look similar to the vertical or the geo that you're in. Those sort of illicit activities, and again, we're able to penetrate with DRP into those illicit marketplaces to find that sort of activity. So just a sampling of some of the sort of DRP use cases that you can expect. Oops, excuse me. The challenge that with DRP and why everyone isn't doing it, it can be really hard. Again, we know that a lot of teams have their hands full just with monitoring their existing digital footprint, the things that you know about your servers, laptops, users, network, all of those things. So to add this kind of nebulous external attack surface on top of it is really hard. And so, it can be challenging to navigate. And again, on the dark web in particular, some of these hacker forums, if, not just anyone can kind of, navigate into these. You need special tools. And in some cases, you need to have developed a persona almost. It's almost, I think of it like undercover work to be able to go into these forums and channels and not get kicked out by the different attackers in there. So to be able to actually talk the talk and see information and understand what's for sale it can be really challenging. Being able to determine what is real and what is not. It's again, your internal attack surface is incredibly noisy, and that you have a lot more context for. That noise gets even louder when you go outside of your perimeter, and so it takes a certain skill set to be able to navigate these external threats and determine what is real, what's a real priority, what requires escalation, that sort of thing. Being able to operationalize that information and know where to take action and be able to actually take the action. So to have the relationships with, again, go back to the phishing example, to have the relationships with the registrars, to take down those domains, to be able to report those things effectively. You don't want to waste time with, legal and trying to figure out on these websites where to go to make a request to take something down. So that can be really hard. And again, you want it to all feel seamless and, part of your wider security ecosystem. You don't want more noise. And so these are some of the challenges and why maybe DRP isn't the most widely adopted technology today. It's not that the value isn't there. Clearly it is. Clearly, being proactive and identifying these threats earlier would benefit everyone, but it's hard to do. And so those are some of the things that we hear, and we know that teams don't have time to do it all. And as much as your internal attack surface is proliferating rapidly, certainly that is true of the external attack surface as well. There are literally every minute hundreds of thousands of hosts and over 600 domains created. It's just rapidly expanding. There's almost 1 million phishing websites created in the first quarter of 2021. Again, unfortunately, all of these numbers just continue to go up every year. And so it's incredibly challenging to keep up with. And again, we know that teams are burnt out. Teams, are struggling with bandwidth and capacity of just their internal attack surface. So teams don't have time to do it all. And again, the value is there, but just, do you have the capacity? Do you have the specialized skill sets, the resources, the relationships to be able to monitor that? And so that's a problem that we're thinking about often at Rapid7 is how can we help teams really take command of their entire attack surface and take control of their security posture and show how they're making their business safer and more resilient. And so if you're not familiar with Rapid7, We've been a pioneer and a leader in security operations for almost 25 years. We were founded by real security practitioners who were frustrated by tooling that actually often made their life harder. And so our team set out to address the real problems that they experienced firsthand in their security and risk teams. They started their journey in the vulnerability space with what would ultimately become one of the top 3 vulnerability assessment products in the world, fueled in part by intelligence that we captured from Metasploit, the top pen testing tool, and the foundation of what will become our open source community. So we've always had a big emphasis on threat intelligence and really understanding the attacker mindset. And from those beginnings, we've evolved into a leading security operations platform that we are today. We're bringing together detection and response and holistic exposure management under one roof. And we process trillions of events and millions of alerts every year. But the stat that I think we're most proud of is the more than 11,000 customers around the world that rely on us to give them command, again, of their total attack surface, internal and external. And they're increasingly trusting more of their security stack to Rapid7 every day. So just a quick kind of context setting of who we are and what we're focused on. But really what our mission comes down to at the end of the day is how do we put you in the driver's seat through every phase of the risk and threat lifecycle. So before, during, and after an event, we want to make sure you have the information, the focus, the partnership that you need to confidently take control of any situation. So before, which is probably a focus for this conversation that we're having today around threat intelligence and digital risk protection, we want to help you prepare and anticipate threats, giving you the best visibility, the best possible hygiene with things like our vulnerability management and security posture management. But importantly, and topically for today, identifying those imminent threats that we know are, the very earliest signals of an attacker choreographing a targeted attack against your organization. So that's a big focus for us. But again, we're also with you during an event and after as well. So during, we operate as an extension of your team, flexing high fidelity detections to ensure that you're finding real threats, active threats, as early and accurately as possible, and that we can help you contain and extinguish those threats as fast as possible. And then after, working with Rapid7, we want to make sure that your environment is always left better than we found it. So helping you move the needle, not just around your security posture, of course, but also, can you go back and show the wider business that you move the needle? How can you help quantify that? How can you demonstrate ROI and advocate for your team and the resources that you need to continue to grow and do better every day? So that's our focus. But again, today we're really focused on those before phases, those proactive steps that you can take. And we've got this managed digital risk protection service. So it's that great digital risk protection technology married with our leading services organization to help you identify some of those early signals that we talked about. And we're looking at them on your behalf 24/7. So we've got a talented veteran security team that is leveraging a combination of automated AI-driven detections alongside their own hunting and proactive services, looking for those threats constantly on your behalf. We're filtering those. We're looking to make sure, we're taking out the noise, taking out anything that doesn't look to be real and relevant and priority for your business, ensuring high fidelity, low noise detections. We're able to give that vetted view. So we're finding the things that are the most relevant. We're working side by side with our MDR SOC so we can investigate the things that require, additional attention, that require, hey, has this phishing site already been, exploited? Have we already seen this botnet in action? Is there, evidence that we can see that these credentials have already been used out in the wild? And then we work with you to notify you, hey, there's this threat out there that has happened. Would you like us to take down this website on your behalf? Would you like us to purchase this information off the dark web for you? We know a lot of organizations, their company, their legal departments don't want them out on the dark web purchasing information, or maybe you don't have access to cryptocurrency or things like that to do it. We can do that on your behalf, and we have an extremely high success rate, over 91% success rate of taking sites down and buying things off the dark web for customers. So exactly, what the scope is, what what has been compromised. We make those recommendations, and we're consulting with you as an advisor, so you know how to navigate these. What, do you have to go back to your team and let them know, hey, we need to reset a password here, we need to quarantine this user? We're giving you that guidance, so you can feel really confident that you have eyes out here on your external attack surface looking for those threats. This is just to give you a flavor, again, of some of the use cases that we would be performing on your behalf with this managed digital risk protection service. So again, looking for those earliest attacker signals, the reconnaissance and resource gathering phases of the attack chain, giving you coverage across the clear, deep, and most importantly, dark web, looking for the early signs of a phishing attack or credentials for sale, data that's been leaked, all of those things that are going to lead to a targeted attack against your organization. We're also able to give you confidence around ransomware leakage. So this could have been a ransomware attack, previous ransomware attack against your organization, or even if, say, a partner of yours was compromised or a victim of ransomware, or someone in your supply chain was a victim of ransomware. We're able to understand, exactly what information, documents, artifacts could have been exposed where your company's information was part of that, and we can help you remediate and recover from that. So you have some extended coverage beyond just, your organization specifically. And again, we're able to take down and remediate on your behalf. And I think this is one of the pieces that customers get most excited about, because again, it can be a little overwhelming in the event of one of these attacks to know, how do I approach Google, or how do I approach this website, this domain, to get this taken down? Or, hey, it sounds like my team, my executive has been compromised in some way, but before I go to them, I want to be really certain. So I'd like to look at this information myself, but I don't know how to purchase something off the dark web. And so for us, again, we've cultivated those personas and avatars out on these dark web forums to take that action on your behalf with a great success rate. And we're able to really reduce the noise. And this is a service that lives in our MDR ecosystem, which we're well known for. Rapid7 has thousands of MDR customers across the globe. So it's a great natural extension of the coverage you're already getting today with our MDR service. So again, just kind of giving you a sense of that 360-degree coverage that you're getting with managed digital risk protection alongside our leading MDR service. So we're able to look out at your macro environment with our MDRP service, help you anticipate those very targeted threats against your organization, and really minimize the exposure there. We want to help you shrink your external attack surface as small as possible and protect your organization out on the clear, deep, and dark web with these different attack types that we've been looking and talking about today. But also, again, it's hand in hand. These analysts sit alongside our MDR SOC analysts, and they're in lockstep. And so, for our MDR customers, we're already monitoring your operating environment. We've got coverage of your endpoints, your networks, your cloud, your users, all of those different things to be able to ensure, when something does break into your environment, we're able to see it, and we're able to monitor across all of these different diverse sources, so you can feel confident that you're covered from endpoint to cloud. And we also have unlimited IR on top of that. So again, that notion of leaving your environment better than we found it. So whether it's a takedown on your behalf, or in the event of an IR, making sure we've totally eradicated a threat from your environment, we're leaving you in a better position. So important to us. And so you've got that 360-degree view when we combine these two services together. There's a question in the chat of, to the effect of, do I have to purchase both together? So again, managed digital risk protection is an extension option on top of our managed detection and response services. So you can start with our MDR services, which many customers do, and then you can expand to MDRP when you're ready. We have lots of different packaging options to meet your unique needs. We really want to meet you where you are in your security journey. So we'd love to talk to you about those different options that we have. Nope, sorry. which is a good segue. So yes, if you are interested, if you'd like to learn more, we'd love to talk to you about it. Again, we have great success helping organizations anticipate, pinpoint, and take action no matter where threats start. We want to be that end-to-end partner for you. So we'd love to talk more. And if you want to visit www.rapid7.com/DRP, you can learn more about our new managed digital risk protection services, as well as our MDR services. You'll find more information there as well. And with that, I'll open it up. I think we hit two. Looks like there's one more question in the chat. It's asking about, I think we kind of answered this one live, but it's asking about, is there coverage for clear web as well? And yes, these services span across the entirety of the external attack surface. And so would love to share more. I know we're just about at time, but would love to share more. If you reach out, we can absolutely follow up with more information. So thank you everyone for joining and listening in. We look forward to hearing from you soon, and have a great day. Bye.
Section here, we've got a link from Rapid7 that'll take you to their managed digital risk protection services, which Megan mentioned just a minute ago. So be sure to check that out if you would like more detail. So with that, let's give away our first $300 Amazon gift card of the day. And the winner of that card is Brian Berryhill from Texas. Congratulations to you, Brian. We will be in touch about claiming your prize. And with that, let's move along to our next presentation in the EcoCast. This one is from eCentire, and presenting for eCentire is Spence Hutchison, a staff threat intelligence researcher. Now that is what I call a cool title. Spence, thanks so much for being here today. You have the mic, sir.
All right, thank you for joining today. This session is called From Defense to Offense, Leveraging Threat Intelligence and Dark Web Monitoring for Enhanced Security. So my name is Spence Hutchinson. I'm a staff researcher on the threat intelligence team here at eCentire. We provide managed detection and response services that span from your traditional telemetry sources like endpoint or network or cloud, along with dark web monitoring. Quick background on myself. I've spent the last 10 years in security operations and threat intelligence teams. And as a researcher, my role is to examine really the intersection of the threats or incidents that we're seeing across our customers and external sources to form really a broader intelligence picture that can be operationalized across our services here at eCentire. So really in this session, we're going to I'm going to take us through some of our recent research into dark web or underground services and how they benefit and even enable ransomware operations. So to kick things off, I wanted to start with a couple of quotes from Microsoft's Digital Defense Report from 2023, which is the latest version of this report. The first one here is that 80 to 90% of successful ransomware compromises originate through unmanaged devices. I think that tells me two things. First, where we have visibility in our network, we seem to do a decent job of identifying and stopping these attacks 10 to 20% of the time. The other thing it tells me is that we have a visibility problem and we aren't doing enough to reduce our attack surface when it comes to unmanaged devices. Now, by unmanaged, think something like, John Smith's personal laptop where he has an active single sign-on session to the company network. Now, the other quote here is that ransomware attacks are up more than 200%. Now, given Microsoft's huge customer base, these stats to me are a bit concerning. Attacks are rising and they're increasingly exploiting gaps in our security posture. Now, for this reason, we really need to consider in today's threat landscape, looking beyond the network edge for evidence of network or account compromise. So we're going to focus a lot on ransomware today. And we're going to explore the underground or dark web services that enable these attacks. Ransomware is a huge concern for our customers, and per some IBM research last year, the total cost has now, we're looking at averages of around $5 million US. So let's start by breaking down a typical ransomware attack into 6 parts. We start with infiltration, gaining access to the network, establishing a foothold, privilege escalation, disabling defenses, inhibiting recovery, so destroying backups or encrypting backups and whatnot, and then stealing and or encrypting data. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of these. Just know that with today's ransomware attacks, the goal is often complete dominance of the network. They still need to, at the end of the day, get into the network, establish a foothold, and then break out of patient zero somehow, and then escalate the privileges. And really speaking from experience, your best bet for stopping these attacks is in the first three phases that I refer to here as the breakout phase. And that can occur in as little as an hour to days, depending on the attacker's workload and, honestly, how much extortion value they put on your organization. The longer we delay our response, the greater our recovery time and cost will ultimately be. Now, as an MDR provider or managed detection response provider, our focus is on stopping these attacks in that infiltration phase. So, what do we see typically in our engagements? We see threat actors using things like exploits, malware, phishing, and valid credentials to access the network. Now, are ransomware groups building all of these capabilities themselves? Absolutely not. For each of these methods, there is usually an underground service that can be purchased or rented. So we could break it down here. For malware, we have malware as a service, literally renting a program or malicious program. It usually has a panel that could be used to manage the attack, and it's pretty much ready to go out of the box. For exploits, we have auction houses that sell these. These can include complete packages that are pretty much ready to go. Phishing, there are services that, there too that can be, ready to go out of the gate, and you can rent those for a couple $100 a month. And credential markets, these usually offer live credentials or, very fresh credentials for as little as $10 that can be used to gain access into networks. Now, these services are what allow actors to upskill and scale their attacks. So let's look at where credentials can be purchased. Now, there's a few shops out there, and we refer to them generally as fraud shops, like Russian Market, that sell compromised or stolen credentials from usually live systems. Now, info stealing malware will typically scoop up nearly every username and password from a compromised machine, and that can include session cookies that they can then turn around and sell on things like Russian Market. Threat actors can even search the posted logs here before they buy. And on the right, we also have an example of bulk log distribution via Telegram. Now, it's basically here, the example on the right is a subscription model for Stealer logs, and you can actually buy it outright or get a lifetime access to this for $2,100. Now, regardless, these credentials can be used to gain access to a network through things like VPN or access to company Slacks or email. All these routes eventually can lead towards infiltration and deployment of ransomware if that's the goal. Now, a quick example of the volume of activity on Russian Market. This is a snapshot from a few years ago, and we saw peaks of 60,000 posts per day. Even on the low end, there's still thousands of new posts each day, all from information stealing malware on infected systems. Really important here to have good anti-malware capability in your organization. But I do need to stress that we have seen instances where unmanaged endpoints get infected and corporate credentials show up on places like Russian Market. Now, it's a good opportunity to recall that earlier slide about unmanaged devices and the need to look beyond the perimeter. This is a great example of where those the credentials from those unmanaged devices might show up. Now, as for example of exploit services out there, here we see a post from the exploit forums. This particular individual is selling their exploit kit. Basically a way to exploit web browsers here is what they're offering. You're paying for malware installations from this kit. And I've got an English translation on the screen there. But to summarize what's going on, basically they're selling a pay per install scheme. Again, no need to have special skills on exploiting vulnerabilities. Just bring your cash and gain this capability. Next, looking at a recent phishing as a service offering that we've been tracking called Tycoon Group. These guys operate on Telegram. They charge about $300 a month for their phishing service. That service provides essentially a panel and the infrastructure to run these attacks. The phishing page itself proxies the traffic directly from the identity service, so something like Microsoft. So the page that the victim will see will look identical to the real thing, because it pretty much is the real thing. And using this, they can steal passwords, and they can also steal MFA tokens and gain access into mailboxes. In my opinion, this is a pretty enormous capability that can be had for a couple $100. And again, it doesn't take a lot of skill to get these things up and running. Now, what if you can't be bothered to go buy these individual services? What if you just want to bring your cash and gain access or get the keys to networks? Well, there is a dark web offering that will essentially gift wrap network access to the highest bidder, and these are called initial access auctions. And essentially, these brokers will sell remote access into victim networks. So here we've got an example on screen. This individual is auctioning access to a telecom company based in the United States. Bidding here starts at $2,000 and could be purchased outright for $5,000 US. Now, this particular company isn't small. Their revenue is reportedly $380 million. But let me draw your attention to that top line there that says USDA VPN. So this means the victim business is in the US, the access level is domain admin, and the access type is VPN. So think about that kill chain I showed earlier. For $5,000, a ransomware group or affiliate can skip most of those steps and go directly to disabling defenses and deploying ransomware through something like group policy, thanks to that domain admin level access. Unfortunately, these access auctions are rising year over year since 2021, and I believe ransomware groups are driving the broader underground economy that supports network access, and without a doubt using these auctions to gain access into victim networks for deploying ransomware. And if you want an example of that, there was just recently the law enforcement takedown or actions against Lockbit. And they revealed some of the insider operators and affiliates. And we took a look at some of those. We found at least one of those affiliates that we looked at had been operating as an initial access broker. So in these forums or in forums like this before joining Lockbit as an affiliate. So how do we know that ransomware groups are using these dark web services in their attacks? Earlier this year, we did release a report looking at publicly known ransomware victims and their exposure across credential markets and initial access auctions. We identified that small to medium-sized businesses, particularly in manufacturing, retail, and business service sectors, had the most exposure across these services and ultimately ransomware. A copy of this report can be found with the handouts along with this presentation. So looking at the initial access broker auctions, we found that access was primarily sold via remote access services like VPN or RDP. You can see on the slide here what industries were most exposed in these auctions. Like I mentioned, these are sectors like manufacturing, business services, and retail. Those are really the top concerns here. In the report, we also identified possible overlap between these auctions and ransomware victims, suggesting that these groups are purchasing access from these auctions. Now, if we move on to credential markets, we did correlate information stealer credentials back to ransomware victims using their company domain. And here we saw education and retail were the most affected. However, that's likely due to mixed employees and customers using a similar login domain. Really here, I think manufacturing sticks out with elevated exposure to information stealing malware, at least preceding their ransomware event. We also looked at all credentials published in the 30 days leading up to a ransomware attack for the publicly known victims, and we found approximately 25% of these victims had new credentials exposed during this time within those 30 days leading up, and that number jumps to an average of 500 plus credentials at any time prior. Now, correlation is obviously not causation, but these credentials present opportunity for adversaries to gain access to email, messaging platforms, single sign-on portals, remote access services like VPN, and they all present an opportunity for gaining access into the network. Now, based on our research, who was most at risk? Like I said, it's really small to medium-sized businesses make up the majority of publicly known ransomware victims in the last 3 years. The chart on screen shows the top 10 ransomware groups since 2020. Groups like Lockbit, clearly lead the way here in terms of victim count, followed by Conti, which has been shut down, and LV. Couple takeaways here. First, most of the top groups here are ransomware as a service groups. That is, they partner with affiliates to scale their attacks. Basically, they're franchising out their ransomware attacks. The other takeaway here is that up and down the stack, SMBs are more commonly victimized by these groups. Now, if we narrow this down to just 2023, these trends remain basically the same. SMBs continue to be the #1 victim. Lockbit remains on top, followed by Black Basta, Elfie, all ransomware as a service groups. Now, we also looked at the intersection of employee size and revenue. These are two attributes that typically define the size or business size. Here on the y-axis, we have the total count of unique ransomware victims, and on the x-axis, the range of revenues for these businesses. Now, the intersection of both is represented by those clusters of those bubbles there you see on the diagram. And here we see an obvious outlier: businesses with fewer than 100 employees and revenue between 1 and 25 million. And then that's followed by the next 3 consecutive revenue groups with 100 to 500 employees. Again, what does this tell us? It tells us that SMBs are overly represented here, suggesting an elevated risk or exposure to ransomware attacks. So to answer the previous question, who is most at risk when it comes to ransomware, our research really does show it's SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses in those industries like manufacturing, retail, construction, business services. But what about dark web exposure? Well, our research shows pretty much the same conclusion for both these questions. My assessment here is that SMBs may lack the capabilities when it comes to detection and response, perhaps more so on the response side. From our experience, intrusion actors will trigger multiple alerts as they break in and start to work their way through the kill chain, assuming you have the right visibility in place. But it ultimately takes people to piece together those alerts, scope the intrusion, and then deny the adversary their objective. And this does take investment in people and technology, which is easier said than done and maybe out of reach for smaller size businesses with smaller budgets. Manufacturing especially leans more towards that SMB end of the spectrum, which falls into that analysis I just mentioned. So what do we need to do to combat this threat? Let me bring back the ransomware kill chain again for some context here. What visibility do we need to maintain or try and reach that ideal containment zone? Well, it's no surprise here. We need to start with the foundational elements of network visibility: endpoint, network, cloud, email, logs from your edge devices. Ideally, we are ingesting that telemetry and we're exploiting it for threat detection and response. Now, when it comes to dark web, visibility into credential exposure, particularly those information stealer markets like Russian market, are crucial. Other data sources include instant messaging channels, initial access auctions, and just broadly speaking, criminal forums and mentions of VIPs or data that belongs to your organization. Now, does a dark web monitoring capability replace our foundational monitoring? Absolutely not. In today's threat landscape, our detection and response process needs to incorporate all of these sources to manage our exposure and respond to threats before threat actors can achieve their objectives. Now, if you're looking for a complete list of recommendations, I will again point you to that dark web and ransomware readiness report that is available in the handout. Now, to end things off, I wanted to leave you all with an example of an incident that involves traditional detection and response that was augmented by dark web visibility. In this particular case, our SOC identified malware on multiple systems within a manufacturing customer's network. They followed their standard containment and processed and alerted the customer. SOC traced the infection to the customer's own website, and our threat intelligence team identified malicious code, which had been inserted into the website's source code. Now, our team took a look at our dark web platform to try and identify the source of the compromise, and we identified credentials with access to that website's backend on Russian market. Now, here's the interesting part. These credentials didn't belong to the customer. they belonged to an employee who worked for a web development firm based in Asia. That individual had become infected with information stealing malware. Someone purchased their credentials from Russian market and then used it to modify the source code of multiple websites using that employee's access. Using our dark web visibility, we were able to augment our investigation to identify a much wider scope of compromise stemming from a trusted provider to our customer. Now, this is a great example of extending your visibility beyond your network perimeter to identify and remediate threats. All right, so before we get into Q&A, I just want to take a moment to talk about eCentire. We are the authority in managed detection and response, and we have been doing this since 2001 with offices around the world, including 2 security operations centers. And we have over 2,000 customers in 80 plus countries in a wide array of industries. And over 65% of those customers are deemed critical infrastructure by CISA. Now, on my side of things, our job on the threat response unit, or TRU, is to identify and counter emerging threats by working with our 24/7 SOC to produce new detection content and investigation playbooks. We also conduct and present this intelligence to our customers via written products and monthly webinars. Now, our service portfolio is designed to help customers remain resilient to the latest cyber threats. This starts by anticipating threats and managing exposure via vulnerability management, but also dark web monitoring and other services. And we then move into withstanding attacks through our managed detection and response services, identifying and containing threats before they disrupt your business. And finally, we offer digital forensics and incident response services to expedite recovery and return to business operations. Now, finally, this is a talk about dark web, and we do offer dark web monitoring services that provide 24/7 detection of threats like credentials, brand impersonations, and just generally exposed data. Like I talked about in the presentation, we correlate that dark web data back to augment our security investigations, and we also work with law enforcement partners to report threat actor infrastructure and activities to assist with disruptions where possible. All right, so with that, I wanted to thank you all for attending this session on leveraging threat intelligence and dark web monitoring for enhanced security, and we have about 5 minutes set aside for some Q&A. All right, we will get into the first question here. And the question is, what are some key indicators that my organization's creds or credentials are on the dark web? So credentials can usually be identified by the account name or the organization's domain. So for example, for eCentire, we would look for any credentials associated with ecentire.com. Now, this gets a bit more complicated with those fraud shops like Russian market because they don't actually post the account names until you buy, but you can still look for domains specific to your organization. I'd recommend services that you employ within your org that have an identifier right within the domain name. So something like ecentire.slack.com would be a good one to identify possible employees within places like Russian market. The next question here, what's the ideal cadence for dark web monitoring? For example, how often should we be looking? Ideally, this kind of capability should be continuous. That is easier said than done. Beyond getting access to sources, if you're looking to roll this capability yourself, continuously scraping them without getting banned or discovered is a bit of a headache. Not to mention processing all that scrape data and searching for it in a timely manner. Anything critical like new credentials or initial access sales should be alerted or identified as soon as possible, ideally in real time. Other issues like brand mentions on social channels or forums, those can be reviewed at a longer cadence, or something like a daily review of those alerts. Really, depending on your dark web vendor, if you're going that route, there should be thresholds that you can set for those types of alerts. The next question here, when companies can mitigate or contain ransomware attacks early, how much does that reduce the impact from a cost and data exfiltration perspective? Yeah, so the figure I mentioned from IBM, I think it was $5 million US average cost of a ransomware incident, that cost is just for response and recovery. It doesn't include the actual extortion payment. If you look at their report, it also showed that this cost did not change much when the the extortion payment was made. So the biggest impact you can have on this cost is moving the detection and containment actions left on that kill chain that I showed. The difference between, eradicating precursor malware on a machine or resetting a compromised account and like a full-blown IR engagement is pretty massive. I just don't have a specific dollar figure to put on that. But it is something to consider when you look at your risk profile, especially if you're within that SMB kind of space or those at-risk industries, like I mentioned. Look at the total cost or average cost of that ransomware recovery versus investing, in your security program now to try and reduce your risk there. Next question is, what are your predictions for the ways that ransomware actors will continue to target SMBs and use dark web services in the coming year? So law enforcement, they're getting better at disrupting these groups by really infiltrating their affiliate programs. So the same thing that enables ransomware as a service groups to scale and really franchise out their extortion attacks makes them vulnerable to infiltration by law enforcement. I expect these groups to try and maintain a low profile and avoid big paydays like hitting a Vegas casino, and really just continue to try and exploit as many smaller organizations as they can. Smaller payment, yes, but comes with less risk and less opportunity or less risk of law enforcement or keeping them off law enforcement's radar. All right, I think that's all the time we had for questions. Again, thank you for attending this session, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for that awesome presentation, Spence. Really important stuff there. Excellent insights in the Q&A. I got a poll question for you while we go through some information here. Are you interested in getting a free eSentire dark web credentials report to see whether your organization's compromised credentials are on the clear, deep, or dark web, and take action to safeguard your online presence? Let them know if you would like that. And one of the things that really impacted me in Spence's presentation was the idea of how vulnerable SMBs really are. And I think we do tend to wonder about that because the payoff isn't as big, but there is a lot less risk when you target SMBs. So if you're an SMB, you need to make sure that that risk is still or gets higher and higher, so you're less likely to be targeted there. So let them know, let eSentire know if you want that free credentials report, and find out where you're vulnerable, maybe in ways that you did not expect. So keep voting in that poll, and I'm going to move on to the next question here, or I'll tell you what. I also want to remind you before we do that about the handouts. Now, we do have a PDF from eSentire, which is an SMB ransomware readiness report, which is something that sounds very, very useful. So head on over to the handouts section and make sure you grab one of those. Thanks for voting in this poll. This feedback is extremely important. And while we finish that up, I am going to hand out the next $300 Amazon gift card. So the winner of the second gift card of the day is Evan Heel from Ohio. So way to go, Evan. Sit tight and we'll get you instructions on how to get your card. And with that, I hope you are ready for the next presentation, folks, because we are about ready to get going on that. This presentation comes from Rubrik. And presenting for Rubrik today is the always informative Veer Choksi, a senior product marketing manager. He has typically great information. I'm sure that's going to be the case again today. So, Veer, it is great to have you back. Take it away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Veer Choksi. I'm with Rubrik, and I've been here for about 2 years. Now, my goal here is to explain how you can use your own data to improve your cyber defense, and also to introduce data threat analytics, which is a set of capabilities that can help you detect threats better so that you can recover from cyber incidents quickly and confidently. And this presentation is geared towards both the IT and the security audience. Now, we all know that the cyber threat landscape has become challenging over the past few years. There's many reasons for this. The attack surface has grown a lot. Users are more distributed, and we have much more complex hybrid environments than in the past. It's also easy to become a cyber criminal, especially with ransomware as a service providers. So the barrier for entry for becoming a cyber criminal is a lot lower than it used to be. And also cybercrime remains financially rewarding. Now, before getting into my main content, I want to set the stage with some research from Rubrik Zero Labs, which is our threat research unit. We commission market research, we use third-party information, and also telemetry from Rubrik customers. 99% of IT and security leaders were made aware of at least one attack in 2022. Now, it isn't always ransomware necessarily. It could be data deletion, whether by a malicious actor or an insider, or even accidental. And it could be politically motivated rather than financially motivated. But the bottom line is that cyber incidents are denial of data attacks. And when your data is down, your business is down. And on average, leaders dealt with attacks 52 times in 2022. So that's roughly once per week. Now, 93% of organizations reported malicious actors attempting to impact their data backups. Backups are often your last line of defense, and if your backups are not available and clean, the victim is much more likely to decide to pay a ransom to the cyber criminals. Now, about 73% of those efforts were at least partially successful. And so backups are something that both IT and security teams have an interest in. Now, out of over 27 million analyzed snapshots, about 21,000 of those contained anomalous activity. That's about 0.07% of the total. About 1,200 encountered an encryption event, and that's 0.004% of total. Now, notably, 100% of encryption events were previously identified as anomalous, and 100% of encryption events were tied to a lack of multi-factor authentication. Now, the number of impacted files could range from thousands to the millions. And nearly 3/4 of observed encryption events affected virtualization infrastructure. Now, traditionally, cybersecurity has focused on infrastructure security around prevention and detection in your production systems. But despite significant investments in infrastructure security and prevention tools, the risk of breaches can only be reduced. They can't be completely eliminated. Attackers are still penetrating these defenses. And so just as important as reducing the likelihood of a successful attack is reducing the impact of an attack. How quickly can business as usual be restored if an attack were to happen? And how can you, as a potential victim, make informed decisions to enable a successful recovery? Now, in spite of the security tools that are in place, there are still blind spots that can make recovery painful and drawn out. So malware might be lurking in your infrastructure. Endpoint detection and response tools can detect threats on devices, but they typically won't alert you to threats that are present on servers because they usually aren't deployed there. Second, it's difficult to accurately assess the blast radius of an attack, which could leave you in the dark on what exactly you need to recover. And third, it's not easy to determine when a threat entered your environment, and this could lead to reinfection and prolonged recovery. So all of these blind spots can increase overall cyber risk and increase downtime. So what if you could leverage your existing backup data to investigate threats and recover with greater speed and confidence? Everybody has backups already, right? So the main thrust of this presentation is that your own backup data can be a rich source of intelligence to improve your overall cyber resilience. Now, I'm sure that most folks have seen the federal government's cybersecurity framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And they're actually thinking of adding another phase, govern, but for now, these are the 5 phases. So let's focus in on the detect piece. Teams are asking questions like, Can we determine the cause and blast radius? Can we minimize data loss? Can we determine the first point of infection? How can we easily conduct indicator of compromise or IOC sweeps without impacting production workloads? And how confident are we that an attacker is not present in our environment? Those sorts of questions can be addressed with data threat analytics. Now, data threat analytics refers to the ability to continuously monitor your data for risks and detect cyber threats. So the basic theory here is that if you're taking regular backup snapshots, you're in a good position to recruit your own data in the fight against ransomware and other cyber incidents. And that's because you're capturing the longitudinal time series history of data if you're protecting your data with Rubrik. Now, additionally, Rubrik manages metadata, including the content, users, and access privileges, which can help to shed light on your data security posture. Now, data security posture is a topic for another day. But by scanning hundreds of snapshots, Rubrik's data threat analytics engine generates signals that are fed into a highly trained machine learning model, building a historical baseline against which new data can be compared to find anomalous modifications, deletions, and encryptions. Again, we're capturing time series data from enterprise, cloud, and SaaS, feeding that data into the data threat engine, and that can result in really valuable security intelligence, shining a light on those blind spots so that you can make informed recovery decisions, and even automated remediation recommendations. So what can you do with data threat analytics? You can detect threats early by automatically identifying indicators of compromise within backups using an up-to-date feed of threat intelligence. You can determine the scope of ransomware attacks using machine learning to detect deletions, modifications, and encryptions. And you can prevent malware reinfection by analyzing the time series history of snapshots for IOCs to identify the initial point, scale, and time of infection. And because the scanning is done on backups, there's no impact to your production systems. Now let's take a look at each of these three services, starting with threat monitoring. So how this one works is that threat intelligence is fed into the Rubrik threat feed. The hashes and Yara rules themselves can come from different contributors. One of the contributors is Rubrik's own InfoSec team, so you can leverage the same intel that we're protecting Rubrik the business with. Intelligence can also come from Zero Labs, which is Rubrik's own threat research team, or it may come from third parties. Either way, we vet the threat intelligence prior to including it in the feed to ensure the quality of the intelligence is high and the threats are relevant to critical infrastructure environments. This intelligence gets downloaded at set time intervals. And when there's new intelligence available, a hunt will kick off automatically and search for threats based off the hashes and Yara rules. Now, should a match occur, you'll be notified right away via email. You can then drill down via the dashboard to see where the threat was located, what hash or Yara rule was matched, and find attributes associated with the hash or Yara for more background information to assist in potentially kicking off other threat hunts via Rubrik's threat hunting service or via third-party tools like a SIEM or an EDR. You can also quarantine the threat from within threat monitoring as well. So essentially, threat monitoring is a turnkey solution to help detect and protect your organization from threats. The intelligence gets downloaded automatically. Hunts based off of this intelligence will be automatic. And if any threats are found, you get notified about the threat, and any attributes associated with that threat will also be shared whenever possible. So it really is that simple. This is literally set it and forget it. The next service under the data threat analytics umbrella is anomaly detection. Now, anomaly detection provides a comprehensive approach to ransomware remediation. We use multi-stage machine learning to detect anomalies in your backup data. Those stages include observing file creations, deletions, and modifications, and comparing it to historical changes within that specific workload. In addition, entropy is analyzed to determine if ransomware-like encryption has occurred. And finally, if possible, we will identify the specific strain of ransomware as well. So if an attack has occurred, Rubrik automates the assessment of the blast radius to quickly understand what applications and files were impacted and when. And that eliminates the intensive manual labor that's usually required, such as bringing up a VM copy and manually comparing and scrubbing for changes. Finally, your backup file system has immutability. Since your data is never available in read-write mode, it can't be changed or overwritten. Fast and flexible recovery options can be used to revert back to the most recent clean version, whether using instant recovery, live mount, file level recovery, or orchestrated recovery. And that brings us to threat hunting. Threat hunting is a really powerful tool that lets you perform custom scans of your backups on demand for specific IOCs. You can identify the point of malware entry so that you can know what point in time to recover to avoid reinfection and minimize data loss. Threat hunting is both broad and deep. It allows you to scan multiple workloads and across time. It's also flexible. It can consume and search for threats via Yara rules, file hashes, and file patterns. These types of threat intelligence are industry standards. Thus, this allows you to leverage threat intelligence from various sources, such as internal sources, like your own InfoSec team, third-party intelligence services that could be paid or open source, from industry groups such as ISACs, and even government agencies that publish threat bulletins. And much like anomaly detection, threat hunts are done on backups, and thus there's no impact on your live production systems. Threat actors are unaware of ongoing hunts. And lastly, since Rubrik backups are immutable, you can identify IOCs that attackers have erased from production systems to cover their tracks. So in sum, threat hunting can shortcut the hunt for the point in time and the place where an adversary may have gained access to your infrastructure and help to define the clean recovery point so that you're not recovering with the malware still in place. So let's look at a typical ransomware attack and how data threat analytics fits in. Bad actors will establish initial access, followed by a lateral move, persistence, privilege escalation, recon, collecting, and staging. And finally, there is exfiltration and encryption. So anomaly detection pinpoints the impact on the target. So you can identify the blast radius so you know exactly what to recover and recover quickly. And threat monitoring and threat hunting identify when the attackers established access so that you can ensure a safe restore point. Now, threat monitoring is a passive activity, while threat hunting is more active if there are specific IOCs that you want to hunt for. Now, these are all very powerful when used in conjunction and help you to make sure that your recovery is as fast and safe as possible. So again, to recap, data threat analytics combines three really powerful threat detection engines. With threat monitoring, you can continuously scan for known threats to detect compromise before the damage is done. With anomaly detection, you can detect file system anomalies to identify data destruction and the blast radius of an attack. And with threat hunting, incident responders can hunt for indicators of compromise throughout the time series of data. So today we focused on data threat analytics, and this is part of a larger data security platform that we offer that includes data protection, data security posture, and cyber recovery as well. With all of these components, you can keep your data safe and make it easy to recover from cyber incidents. I did also want to mention that being cyber resilient is about more than just having the right technology in place. Rubrik also offers a ransomware recovery warranty that guarantees that your data will be available for recovery in case of an incident. We will pay out up to $10 million in recovery-related expenses if that is not the case. And so far, we've never had to pay out. Included with Rubrik support at no extra cost is our ransomware response team, which is a team of experts that's there to guide you during the high-stress moments after a cyber incident. They've performed many successful recoveries. And like I've mentioned, Rubrik Zero Labs is our research group that delivers vendor-agnostic insights on reducing data security risks. And I encourage everyone to check out the latest report from Rubrik Zero Labs. So the question we should all ask ourselves is, can we afford to wait during downtime? And how much is that going to cost in both financial and non-financial terms, such as the reputational damage that a cyber incident can cause? And so a quick example, Lang's Building Supplies is a Rubrik customer that was able to fend off a ransomware attack with hardly any interruption to business as usual. They ended up with without having to pay any ransom, had zero data loss because they had Rubrik's data security solution in place. Now that's cyber resilience. So thank you all for tuning into this webinar. I hope you found it helpful. And in closing, really briefly, the most important asset for an organization is your data. And you can have really great cybersecurity controls at the application, network, endpoint, etc. levels. But if an attacker does manage to get in and deny you access to your data, are you going to be able to recover within an acceptable time frame? Do you know exactly what was impacted? Can you be confident that your environment is free from known threats? Do you know what exact point in time you need to recover to minimize data loss and avoid reinfection? In today's day and age, you need to have good answers to all of those questions. And that's where data threat analytics applied to your existing backup data can really help. So thank you all again for your interest. And if you'd like to learn more, please get in touch.
And fantastic presentation, Veer. So much education going on in that. And those are some very important questions you asked right at the end there. I hope the attendees were paying attention because they do need to be answered. And now it's time for the next poll question. Let Rubrik know what additional information you'd like to see from them. I also want to remind everyone about the handouts. That's that little tab right there next to the questions tab that a lot of you have been using. We've got an ebook from Rubrik today. Now that is a great resource. The ebook is entitled Becoming Unstoppable Against Ransomware. That sounds good to me. So head over to the handouts section and get that book right now. You will be glad you did. And with that, we are going to move on. Everyone, just keep voting here for another couple of seconds about what you'd like to see from Rubrik, what you'd like to get from them next. And we are going to move on now. We are up, ladies and gentlemen, to our final presentation in the EcoCast today. And this session comes from PlexTrack. And presenting for PlexTrack is David Rushton, a sales engineer. David is in the house right now and he is ready to go. So I am going to turn this over to him. David, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keith, for that introduction. So David Rushton, sales engineer here at PlexTrack, experienced MSSP, pen testing, vulnerability management, and I'm very excited to give you guys a walkthrough today of how you can maximize your threat intelligence for more proactive security. And this is a little bit close to my heart because it might be the semi-most boring part of today's talk. And the reason I say that is because it's the processes behind the threat intelligence and dark web intelligence that you bring in. On the market today, there is tons and tons of great sources you can use, from open source to private tools. However, the area that a lot of companies lack in is the ability to actually process it themselves. There is so much you can do and so much you can use, but organizations today are just not standardizing the processes for validation and tracking the intelligence, which leaves massive amounts of risks. I've talked to many Cisco's, many organizations, and one of the first questions I always ask them is, are you using threat intelligence and dark web? And they always respond like, yes, of course we are. And I'm like, great, how? And their responses are incredibly vague on a very common answer. And I always tell people a difference between a great organization using dark web intelligence and one that is maybe on the lower maturity curve is not in relation to how much you are possibly spending or how much time you are putting into it. It is regarding the processes and the context that you apply and what's important to you. So let's kind of separate a little bit today, and this is what we're going to talk about in what is the current problem and what are the solutions around it. And I really want today to be quite educational. So please, with them QAs at the end, I'm looking forward to hearing lots of questions that you might have. So let's talk about the current state. Most organizations engage in some form of dark web and threat intelligence collection, but they face a lot of challenges. They lack sensitivity. They don't have a clear understanding of what they want to actually look for. And when that happens, efforts become a little bit unfocused and you become a little inefficient. The second one is they get overloaded with data. The sheer volume of dark web and threat intelligence that exists in the world today is absolutely massive. And if you're not being very focused with what you want, you tend to overlook or not act quick enough to what actually matters. The next one is undefined priorities. And really, this is the standardization that I was kind of talking about at the start, is what methods are you actually using to evaluate the risk or relevance of the findings to your organizations to help you be more focused and respond effectively. Now, I've talked about it a little bit more already, but if you have this current state, you're probably having consequences such as missed threats, wasted resources, inadequate protection. And what I've always talked about this in this area is people don't realize it's happening. They will go and buy and they will or start to collect dark web and threat intelligence, but they don't realize that they actually have to do something with it. And that's kind of why I said this is going to be the less interesting maybe to some people because it's not as sexy per se. It's not like, hey, let's go and find some dark web, let's go threat hunting and using all the cool words. I'm using words like processes, validation, which is going to have a much larger impact, even if you're using from open source all the way to the highest quality data source, open dark web intelligence source on the market today. You need to have something in place. And the wasted resources is a massively big one for me on the consequences side. The amount of organizations from public to private that I've seen hunt down and figure out that really the dark web or possible attack coming from hacker discussions have been false, or they've been misunderstood in some way, or they don't really apply to their most protected resources. And what I've seen is that really talented folks are trying to validate it, but they don't really have a standardization around it. They don't have a way to track it as well. And I really want to get into this and really want to get into not just the problem that I'm laying out right now, but also how can we improve it. And I think that's something as a market and an industry as a whole within cybersecurity, and not just in the vulnerability management or pen testing or detection side, but also in the post as well, and also in the SOC world, malware analysis, IP detection, and incident and response. How do they use it needs to have some focus that matters to you and to the situation that you are in. So let's move on. So next one is we're talking about elevating it. So what do we do? What does standardization look like? So we need a new approach. The absence of this structured, prioritized, lack of context-driven approach to dark web and threat intelligence undermines a lot of the efforts that you do and exposes your organizations to unnecessary risk without you even realizing. Now, the value of standardizing your processes is that you actually start to validate. You start to track. So you start to categorize and assess the actual different types of finding, the different types of intelligence that matters most to you. So think about it. If you find PII really important, maybe credentials intelligence is really important to you. So you have that as a higher level of importance or criticality in some way. Or if you do a lot of web applications and you're really, really important tracking the IPs coming in, IP threat intelligence or analysis is going to be very important to you as well. So you need to figure out what's important to you, what do you actually want to collect, and why do you want to collect it. You want to then allocate efficiently the resources to that and you want to allocate them resources, not just in general to dark web and say like, hey, you're in charge of this, off you go. You want to say, all right, allocate to the most critical threats and have a workflow behind that as well. Move along. Perfect. The next one is going to be the contextualization. So you need to understand, how does this threat relate to you? That's really, really key. Do you know what I mean? What are the efforts that you're going to apply to the specific threat landscape that you're looking to do? And what are the vulnerabilities that you're most worried about? And how do they prioritize based on you as well? The final one is understanding how you're going to respond based on the potential impact to your own operation assets. For example, if you know continuity is really high on a certain web application or certain asset, then you're going to respond very differently if you find a potential threat through your threat intelligence feed or dark web against that particular asset. And how you validate it and respond to it is very different to how maybe you do the IPs. Some will be really easy. I'm not saying everything needs to be really difficult. For example, you can automate a lot of this as well. But you need to have a discussion around the types of threat intelligence you're collecting and how you respond to it, and also the categorization of that intelligence. Because even just one categorization, and one thing I've worked very closely with before is dark web. There's a very big difference between looking through hacker forums and seeing potential implications against your brand or attacks coming your way, or maybe attacks against vulnerabilities that you have in your environment, versus credential intelligence. So you need to categorize it, think about how you respond to it, and understand the impact on your organization. Not only will that help you with the efficiency in responding, reducing risk, but now you can actually talk to the wider audience, so your stakeholders, the board, your leadership, your managers, about, hey, I'm doing this because of this exact reason. That's the really powerful aspect of what we're talking about here, is you can show progress. You can measure it now. So it's really, really important that you think about these things when you're collecting this data. And this is also really big on when you're assessing maybe market tools. Every tool in the market today, if you are looking to buy something, will have its own strength. Does that strength that they have map to what you're trying to protect? That's really essential as well. Now, one thing I always think about when a lot of people present this stuff to me is that they're not tailoring it to themselves. Now, what I mean by tailoring is, I mean in presentation. So let's say a little story right now. You're a CISO of a tech company and you find that, hey, I'm going to start prioritizing my vulnerabilities based off the intelligence I see. I.e., maybe, hey, did I have an exploit available? What type of exploit is that? Or someone talking about in the dark web, etc., etc. Now, the important thing here is you can take that as it is and say, hey, I'm just going to patch all my exploits. But the issue that I see in the marketplace today is that, what type of exploit is that? Where did it come from? Have you actually validated that that exploit is a real thing? And how did it impact the application you have? What security controls do you have exist already that could maybe stop that exploit? Do you know what I mean? Most cross-site scripting vulnerabilities today and the exploits against them will be stopped by most firewalls. Obviously, that's not the case. So again, you need to tailor how you respond to that. Do you want a validation against it? Are you going to prioritize based off the criticality? Are you going to prioritize based off the business criticality of that particular asset and what it means to the organization? So there's a lot of thought process that you need to think about when you ingest this data. And a lot of times I see organizations, they ingest it and they go, good, and they wipe their hands clean, off they do the next thing. I really want you guys and the market as well today to really think about, how are you tailoring it? How are you prioritizing the response to it as well? Now let's move on to the next one. Now the final bit, and I think this is something that's very under talked about, is that threat intelligence and dark web intelligence is a team essence. It impacts everything across all of your silos, from the vulnerability management to the SOC, to incident response, to even the sysadmin, to your engineers, your application engineers, whatever types of categorization of silos you have, all of them are impacted in some way, or they can benefit some way of having this data. So one thing I want to get across today is, how are you actually collaborating on the threat intelligence? How are you utilizing it across the organizations? How many types of sources are you actually bringing in today? And could it be used somewhere else? And one thing I've always seen is having that shared understanding, hence the word being underlined, of the potential threats, and ensuring that the relevant stakeholders of each silo or within each silo have an understanding of the actual threat against it and what that means to the operation and the results of your organization as well. A lot of times I talk to CISO and I talk to organizations and I go, what threat intelligence do you use? And they always tell me, oh yeah, we use, this threat intelligence source, maybe that, let's keep with the example of the vulnerabilities, they're looking at exploits. I'm like, fantastic, it's amazing. Is that shared across all of the team? Like, do your pen testers know about this intelligence source? Do your red teamers? Do your incident management? Or the way to actually start to figure out where the attack came from? You need to have that conversation across your team, and they need a way to collaborate. So not only are the processes you need to think about, but you need to think about how are teams collaborating on this to have a level of validation against it. And how are you coordinating that response as well? Because a lot of these threats, they can get quite complex. They are quite sophisticated. Not every single one, but you need to make sure that you are responding to it appropriately to what that means to your organization, to the level of criticality it means to you as well. That means, asset level or maybe personnel level as well. And also documenting this as you go through. That is the final thing that I really think is absolutely essential with our organizations and the market today. A lot of what we're talking about now is not documented. You might automate it and bring it in, and you might prioritize, and you might even look at it, and you might even act on it as well. But how are you tracking it? How are you coordinating it? Did everyone know that you've possibly fixed or documented a threat intelligence piece? Let's use the example of the credential intelligence. If you find leaked credentials on the dark web, how do you respond? Who needs to know? How is it documented? How do you validate they're real? How do you validate the personnel against it? Does the compliance need to get involved? These are the questions that I always ask, and it always, on an average basis, get a very big answer of excuses. And it's the truth. It is very easy today in the market and the tools that we have access to go and buy and make that us think that we've increased our maturity through that. But you need to understand that the process behind it are sometimes more important. One of my biggest recommendations to organizations that are looking to mature their ability in using threat intelligence and dark web is I tell them to pick one source, and I always tell them to start with open source, and it could be anything. And I get them to do the research as well. Sometimes I can provide some guidance, I provide some examples, and I get them to think, okay, now what? You've got this intelligence, what do you do? And I get them to go through that process, and they get a lot more value of using that open source and thinking about how they tailor and respond to it that means something to them than them going to go and buy a tool today. Once they have that sorted, then they can go and buy the tools or increase their source thing and apply it to different areas, because now they've created a standardized way that they can do it. That is really, really beneficial overall. Now, let's go to the next slide. Perfect. So I talked a lot today about, what I think and what my recommendations are in how to use threat intelligence and the secret sauce that I think should be applied to every organization today. And I know a lot of the other organizations on this webinar likely have talked about the sources they have, how they do it. And I really wanted to get across that there is a bigger conversation you need to have as a team, as an organization, when you bring that threat intelligence in. And now Plextrack is playing in this field. We don't collect threat intelligence. We don't collect dark web. But what we do help with is the things I talked about today. We help with you standardizing them findings. We help with you tracking. Now, We also help with contextual scoring and prioritization, and we also help with the collaboration. You need a place to document, to validate, and that's something Plextrack is really, really in the position to do today. When I talk about standardized findings, what I'm talking about is when you bring that dark web source in, you need additional ways to add evidence. You need additional ways to add validation. You need ways to provide not just evidence that exists, but evidence that you fixed it. What does that look like? How do you track that? How do you track standardized findings across credential intelligence, vulnerability intelligence, IP intelligence? All these are very important things, and you standardize them in very different ways. You need a tool and one place to do that. That's something Plextrack has a high vision of doing. In addition to the tracking and reporting capabilities, how do you walk into a boardroom today and say, look how much work we've done? How do you customize that to different personnel? How do you communicate that to different stakeholders in your organization? Plextrack has the ability to report in different ways, to present information in different ways. We also can help you with the tracking side. We can help you not just in tracking in a typical manner, but in facilitating different processes for different scenarios. So we give the power in your hands to facilitate the operation you need to tackle the threat intelligence in your way that means something to you. The next one is a contextual scoring and prioritization. On the prioritization, what we do is we can help group these findings in accordance to certain applications or certain network segmentation. For example, if you bring in a load of sources of dark web intelligence, threat intelligence from the credential intelligence, that credential intelligence might have different logins and maybe cookies associated to different applications across your organization. Now, what you might want to do is group that accordingly to the applications you're looking to prioritize. So you can prioritize it and then make treatment plans. You can start looping in the different teams, such as the sysadmin who are in charge of that application, for example. So maybe they can do a reboot of that password that's associated with that credential intelligence. Maybe you can have the evidence to go with it for that priority as well. So when you go to your stakeholders, you can go like, look, we found all this stuff, we fixed it, here's the proof, here's the priority, we've lowered it, this is our strategy. The other one is contextual scoring. We want to unblack box the scoring methodologies that organizations do today. We want to give you the ability to create your own scoring within your own context. So if something means something really important to you against a priority, hence, hey, if I see a credential intelligence and they have a password with a URL, I want that score to go up because that means something really important to me. And now I can, communicate that to the wider people in my organization. And the final one is the enhanced collaboration. This is absolutely essential. I think this is massively overlooked. Plextrack has the ability to collaborate across teams. We have the ability to track findings, track changes. You can make comments. You can have almost like a Google Doc experience within Plextrack itself. So teams can talk to each other and have everything in one place. That's the real value. Is as you're reporting on this stuff, as you're tracking it and stuff, you can work with your team at the same time. Now, that is all from me on this end. Keith, I'll hand it over back to you. Thank you for your time, everyone. I really appreciate it.
And thank you, David. What a great presentation. I loved it. I will say that you mentioned that process may not be sexy. And while that's probably true, process is just foundational. Without it, you're kind of wandering around. You don't know how to react to things. You don't know how to anticipate. You don't have a way to evaluate, after the fact too. I mean, process just undergirds everything you're doing. So here's a shout out for processes, right? Even if it doesn't have that wow factor,
I appreciate it, Keith. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So I threw up the poll question here. Please let us know as Dave and I are going through some questions here, what additional information you would like about the PlexTrack solution. They are standing by and ready to talk to you. So please keep voting while we go through these. Now, remember also that we have a great handout from PlexTrack that I encourage everyone to download before we're done today. It's a link to get a demo so you can see PlexTrack in action. That's definitely worth a look so you can see what it can do for you. So our first question here today for you, David. Paul wants to know, is PlexTrack able to streamline and make workflows efficient enough for an SMB to monitor threat intel, even with minimal staffing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key thing about PlexTrack is that we have the ability to ingest multiple types of data. We have multiple tools that can do that, but we also have the ability to do CSV uploader. Now, the nice thing about PlexTrack is, yes, we have APIs behind the background, but what we have something called the parser action. And what the parser action can do is it can help automate and clean the data that comes in. So you can ignore things, you can change the severity, but what else you can do is you can have standardization from a write-up standpoint. Now, it's kind of hard without showing you, but we have this knowledge base where you can make pre-write-ups in accordance to what you want to say. So for example, let's say you bring in credential intelligence, and I've used that example quite a few times. I'm going to keep going with it, but let's say you have write-ups against it, that you hide in a password, you find a username against a URL, and you say like, hey, I want to say this for that. You can assign it to that in accordance. So you can add the context pre-sent. Now, in addition to that, you then can track it and assign people to it, all within the platform. So there's no need to have a ticketing system against it. You can utilize the notifications that we have as well and organize it in clients and reports. So there's a few different things we can help streamline from an SMB standpoint. 100%. Good question.
That is great to hear, because obviously they're the ones very often the most strapped and fighting fires constantly. Okay. Next up, someone wants to know, how do I get started using threat intel, and what types of intelligence data should I begin with? Really good question.
Yeah, great question. So the sources I would definitely recommend getting started with is the vulnerabilities is my recommendation. There's a lot of open source threat intelligence on exploitation of vulnerabilities in the market today. And I'm talking from Twitter, even Reddit, they talk about it a lot as well. And you don't even need to go to the dark web to scrape this data. You can go to ExploitDB, where they're collecting exploits. You can go to multiple sources. Alien Vault also give you free indication of exploitation of a vulnerability. So does Microsoft. That is my number one recommendation for organizations today, to figure out which vulnerabilities exist in their environment and which ones are actually truly being exploited in the wild today.
Great stuff. Yeah, you gotta have an accurate view of what's going on. Okay, next up, what are the common mistakes people make when they try to use dark web intelligence for the first time in this sort of proactive way?
I think the biggest one is that they think buying will solve their problems for them. I think that's the biggest thing I've seen of all the thousands of conversations I've had, is when they think about using dark web or threat intelligence, the first thing they think about is, what can I buy to do it? I personally think that's one of the biggest mistakes you make, is because you will go into you'll go into a rabbit hole with all the tools on the market today, all doing different things, and they will likely confuse you even more. You would need to decide what's important to you, what data you want to collect. And sometimes that is finding a tool in the market because maybe open source doesn't have it or doesn't have it in a certain way you want. But you need to figure that out for yourself first before you go and talk to someone. Make your own criteria of what intelligence you want to collect and what's most meaningful to your organization.
Just great advice. No silver bullets out there for sure. Yeah, not yet. So final question for you today here, David. Someone wants to know, asks, what is the actual impact I can expect from using dark web intelligence in my security program? And the second part of that is, how do I know if it is helping us get better? So a nice practical question there.
Yeah, really good question as well. And I think this comes to part of my presentation is, you know you're getting better because you're actually tracking it. A lot of times is it's coming to the foundational, figuring out what's important to you, figuring out the impact that has to your organization if something occurred, maybe hypothetical. You have to think like that sometimes, to think from a hacker's view. But then you can start measuring the impact. So if you are doing the credential intelligence, the vulnerable intelligence, the IPs, if you're starting to understand threat acting or threat hunting, then you start to build what it means to you. And that means then you start to build a bigger impact of like, hey, it's not just these general comments you see in the market of like, hey, I can reduce the likelihood of a ransomware attack on yourself because you're using our tool. Now you can actually say, no, I can reduce the likelihood of ransomware attack to my organization because that's going to do this, this, and this, and this. And it's within your own context. That's when you go and speak to the stakeholders and the board, you're talking about your own personal context and your own personal impact that you're reducing. And the fact that you're measuring it through the validation and the tracking that's coming from your data sources, now you can give them numbers of, hey, we validate all of these criticals because these criticals mean this to us, and we validated they're not real, or they're real, and we've done this particular action to it as well.
Okay, outstanding. And final thing, but just before I let you go real quick, you have created a lot of interest around what PlexTrack is doing. If somebody wants to get started with PlexTrack today, in fact, or find out more, what do you recommend they do as their very next step, David?
I think a next good step in my high recommendation is go to plextrack.com/try. And the reason I say you should go to that specific link is because you can actually do a nice little walkthrough of PlexTrack today to actually see what the platform looks like. It is a very basic. And then if you're really interested in seeing more, you can actually fill in and get a request for a demo. And you might even get me depending on where you are in the world. And I'd love to have a little chat with you guys.
All right. So maybe you're going to have a really long day then after, if a bunch of people are going to want to get hold of you when they call up and be like, I want to talk to David.
You're more than welcome. I would love that. If you're more than welcome to request me. So please let me know if I've been requested. I feel like I want to tell everyone I've been requested. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, David, this has been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. Thanks for educating us on PlexTrack and what they're doing. Always great innovation going on with your company. And it's been really fun to learn today from you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much as well, Keith.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. So that was PlexTrack, and that was the very last presentation of the day. We are not all done yet, though. It is time for our final prize drawing of today's EcoCast. We've got one more $300 Amazon gift card to give away. And the winner of this one is Brett Cohen from Pennsylvania. Way to go, Brett. We will be in touch about claiming your prize very soon. Well, everyone, you have made it through another great event. And if you are thinking this is a great event and thinking also that this might be something that interests you, well, we want to hear from you. We can do exactly what we did for these other clients today for you. We can do specialized events. We can build one just for you. We can have you on with a group of other vendors talking about various products and services. So if that describes you and you have an interest, please reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com and find out what we can do for your service or product. With that, I want to let you know about an EcoCast that is coming out. It's an AI-focused event that is going to be happening 1 week from today that may pique your interest in a big way. This event is called Discovering the Pivotal Role of Storage in Your AI Aspirations, and it features Pure Storage. That is going to be Tuesday, March 12th. 2024, 1 week exactly from today at noon Eastern, which is, of course, 9 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to hop on that, well, you can sign up right when this event is over. And this event is over right about now, everyone. It has been so much fun to be with you today. I want to thank all of our presenters for putting together these fantastic presentations, demos, Q&A, insights. It's just been so much fun for me. I want to thank all of our clients clients for making this event possible, including Rapid7, eCentire, Rubrik, and PlexTrack. And finally, last but never ever least, I want to thank all of you attendees for being here with us. We do this for you. It's always the highlight of my day to be here with you, talking with you, getting to know you better. So thanks for being on with us. And I promise, folks, to do better on the next multiple choice quiz that the Mod Squad puts together. Well, that's it, folks. I am out of here for today. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in the next one.